Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unfinished Business. Tonight, I have a very special guest with us. I'm Rajette Harris, and with me, I have Kadida Kenner, who is the campaign director for Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania. Tonight, we're going to talk about the current Supreme Court vacancy and why courts are important and how this position could affect not only the upcoming election, but generations to come. This is live, so please send us your questions. Please send us your comments in the comment box, and we will respond to you. So, how are you this evening?
I'm hanging in there. That's usually my response nowadays. I'm hanging in there, Rajat. Thank you for having me today. I really appreciate that.
Tell us a little bit about your organization, please.
Sure. So, Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania has been around in some form or fashion for the last 10 plus years. We talk about really advocating for the federal courts, protecting their independence, giving a lot of education about the federal courts so that folks can understand the process of how a judge becomes a judge, why it's important to care about our court system, and what folks can do to advocate to protect the courts.
As you know, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg recently passed away on September 18th. And she really left behind a legacy where she played an important role in a number of famous Supreme Court rulings. She was only the second woman to sit on the bench, and currently there's only been four. And she really cemented herself in America's history as a champion for gender equality and a fighter for social justice. Did you get to see On the Basis of Sex that came out a year or two ago?
Unfortunately, not. I did not have
Okay.
time to see that. Absolutely
Yeah.
not. I have a
It
hard
was
time
great.
catching. Yeah, I have a hard time catching movies. I did get to see though Marshall with Chadwick Boseman. I did catch that one when it came out in the theaters.
Yes, that was good. What was nice about Basis of Sex is it showed the justice as a law student, and where she took on her first Supreme Court case. And it had to do with challenging gender roles, although it was the reverse. It was actually a male that was being denied a tax break for being a male versus a female. That was what was so interesting to her, to me, is she took on gender roles and in all ways,
Yeah, yeah.
not just one way. But how do you see this vacancy sort of playing out? As you know, the Republicans are focusing a lot on the process of it, as far as filling it. The Democrats, I would argue, is focusing more on the issues that are going to come up in the next year or two to try to motivate voters to come out to the polls and vote.
Yeah. So, what's really important to note, about the passing, about the passing of RBG is that, yeah, as you mentioned, Rajat, she was a champion of equality and our democracy. Um, Groundbreaking, the work that she was able to do. Her legacy will live on forever. But I think it's really important for folks to know that there's lots of issues that we care about in the state of Pennsylvania and across the country. And a lot of those issues are eventually arbitrated in federal courts. And so while we are all very concerned about what's going to happen to this vacancy for the Supreme Court, we need to make sure we're concerned about all the vacancies as well. The lower courts are very important. That's where we're going to get the next justice from, the lower courts. And so I think that we just need to really focus in on protecting the integrity of our federal courts, protecting the legacy of our federal courts, the credibility of our federal courts. And we need to have a fair process. The polls show that Americans want a fair process here. And the majority of folks don't believe that this current administration should be the administration that actually puts the next judge on the bench. So there's a lot at stake right now, not only for this upcoming election, but beyond, and how it relates to our federal courts.
Well, talk a little bit about these lower courts, because a lot of people don't understand the process and when a lawsuit is filed, sort of how it goes up. Can you kind of go over that process with us?
Absolutely. I'll give you an example because maybe that'll be easier for folks to digest. I'll give you the example of why some cases actually go to federal court versus a state court. So why does a case go to the federal courts? Why does it, appear there versus appear before the common pleas court judge in Dauphin County or someplace else? And the example I'll give you is Trans Am trucking case that we heard about during the confirmation process of Justice Neil Gorsuch. Trans Am Trucking is a business that operates in multiple states, which made it a federal case because it does business in multiple states. So it couldn't be heard by just one state. There was a gentleman who was a truck driver for Trans Am Trucking, and he was out in his truck, his trailer, and his cab on a freezing night in Colorado. His brakes went out on his truck, on his trailer, and he called his job and said, I would like to leave my trailer behind and drive my cab away and save my life. I'm going to die in this cab if I stay here any longer. He did that. When he got back to work, they fired him for leaving his trailer behind. He sued his job on basis of reasons that I think we should all understand. His job, and what happened after he did sue, he won his case under district court. So there's 3 levels of court. He took it to the district court level, which is the lower trial courts. The trial court there at the district level in Colorado declared that he was correct in leaving his trailer behind and saving his life. Well, like what businesses do, they're going to appeal because they don't want to have to give up that money. And so the Trans Am Trucking appealed that case to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. That's the next level on top of the district courts, is the appellate court. And they appealed that case. A panel of judges heard the case, determined that the district court made the correct ruling in allowing that man to leave his trailer behind and that his job should never have fired him. There was one dissenting vote on that panel as it relates to that gentleman, saving his life. And that one dissenting vote was Justice Neil Gorsuch, at the time a circuit court judge on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. So there's levels. There's the district courts that hear the trials, hear the cases. That's where most cases will go. And then there's the appellate court, which will hear the appeals, so the Circuit Court of Appeals. And then there's the United States Supreme Court. So 3 different levels there, these federal courts.
And all 3 levels are appointed? And if so, by whom?
So that's the thing. All of these judgeships, there's more than 850 of them, federal court judges across the country. All of them are nominated by the President of the United States and then confirmed by all 100 senators. So there's the advice and consent that's possible out of our Senate, and then they are then voted on by all 100 senators. So every judge, even a judge that sits out in Pittsburgh, a judge that sits in the Middle District here in Harrisburg, or a judge that sits in Philadelphia for the federal courts, all of those judges received a vote from all 100 senators to become a judge.
So why should voters care then if they can't vote for these individuals? Why do these courts matter then?
Yeah, courts matter. The judges matter. They should care because these folks are going to be making decisions about their lives. I always ask this question when I was traveling the state and talking about the importance of the court. And I ask folks what issues it is that they care about. They'll say LGBTQ rights, civil rights, voting rights, environmental rights, civil rights, all the different things that we care about, immigrants' rights here in this country. If you care about these issues and you're already advocating for these issues, you need to care about them as it relates to the courts because they'll be the final arbiter. Most of these situations will come to needing arbitration. They'll need to be heard in the courtroom. And if you care about these issues, then just know that they're going to be heard in the federal courts. And we have to protect their independence from the deep, dark money sources such as the Federal Society and the Heritage Foundation, who pump lots of money into recruiting folks out of college to become federal judges. And as you'll see, Rajette, these judges that we have right now that are being put on the bench by the Trump administration are young, relatively young. They're in their 30s and 40s, meaning they will sit on the bench for a lifetime, which means that's 30 plus years.
Yes.
So if we have to care about the courts. If you care about the different issues you care about, then you have to care about the courts because they're going to hear the cases with these.
Yes, Amy Coney Barrett, that he nominated to replace Justice Ginsburg, is only 48. So that's one thing that he has done. He has really packed the courts with very young conservative judges. Mm-hmm. That is definitely going to be part of his legacy. So since these individuals aren't voted for and someone wanted to get involved, and what type of advocacy efforts could they do?
Great question. So the one thing that you can do here in Pennsylvania is you can reach out to our U.S. senators. Our U.S. senators here, both Bob Casey and Pat Toomey, they are supposed to have advice and consent as it relates to putting a judge on the bench here in Pennsylvania for our federal courts and across the country. And so we need to reach out, particularly to Senator Toomey, who has rubber stamped every single judicial nominee that has come across his desk from the Trump administration, even against the advice and consent of his colleague and the senior senator, Senator Casey. At one time, Senator Casey and Toomey had a good working relationship as it relates to putting judges on the benches here in the federal courts for Pennsylvania, but that relationship has soured under the Trump administration because they're not honoring decorum and different traditions, such as the blue slip tradition that they once held a gentleman's agreement on how they would make judges here in the state of Pennsylvania. So if you want to advocate and help protect the independence of these courts, then you reach out to Senator Toomey's office and tell him to stop rubber stamping Donald Trump's unqualified judicial nominees. And there have been many unqualified judicial nominees. And Senator Toomey has selected that he is going to vote on every single one of them. And that includes like that even the ones who won't confirm that Brown versus Board of Education was correctly decided.
Did you watch the first presidential debate at all last night?
I watched in horror and shock, like many others, especially around the conversation about the federal courts and the Supreme Court, particularly when Donald Trump mentioned that there were lots of vacancies that he walked into. And so there was a lesson there that the American public didn't get to hear, which is why there were so many vacancies that Donald Trump walked into. So just a little context, a little background. When Obama became president in January of 2009, he walked into a horrible economy. He walked into an economy where we were entering a depression. People were looking for food and jobs. And that was the concern. The concern wasn't to pack the bench. The concern was to make sure folks were able to eat dinner at night. And then what happened in his last 2 years of his presidency is that Senator Mitch McConnell decided they weren't going to have hearings or allow Obama's judges to be heard or even have hearings, like interviews, to be sat on the bench. And in Obama's last 2 years in office, he was only able to confirm 22 judges his last 2 years in office. And compare that to the more than 210 judges now that Donald Trump has confirmed in a little over 3.5 years. So yes, Donald Trump walked into almost 130 vacancies, and that's because Mitch McConnell would not call these folks up for a vote.
Right. There's always a missing part of the story.
The missing part.
Were you surprised that he openly admitted that one of the main reasons he wanted to rush to fill the Supreme Court seat was in case the court had to decide the election? Did that surprise you?
I wish I could say it was surprising, but there's always a reason behind why they're trying to make specific judges or justices in this case. So no, I think that he's been leading us up and down this path for some time now and setting this up with his messaging that there's going to be an issue with this election, that he doesn't trust the processes that are in place. And so I think that he needs to ensure there are 9 justices on the bench in case he believes that they need to hear some kind of case regarding our election. So no, I wasn't surprised to hear that. I'm glad that he said it out loud so others could hear it.
Would you like to kind of educate our listeners and watchers on how Supreme Court justices don't count ballots? That's something else he had mentioned last night.
Yeah, that's usually not what they do. That's not what Supreme Court justice usually does. Yeah.
You can't make this stuff up sometimes.
No.
What are some issues that you can see coming before the federal courts in the next year or two? As we already know, the Affordable Care Act is already there, and the court already struck down, in my opinion, a key portion of it earlier this year, as far as employers not having to give birth control to their female employees. I think that was a huge blow, personally, to women's reproductive rights. But there are other parts also of the Affordable Care Act that's before the courts. But outside of healthcare, what are some other issues that you can see coming before the federal courts that people should know about?
Yeah, I mean, our federal courts are going to hear, and not just the Supreme Court, but our lower courts, because that's where the majority cases are heard. So our lower courts are going to hear all kinds of cases in the next 2 years, no matter who the president of the United States is going to be. They're going to hear cases involving the environment. Obviously, there's lots of issues within that community and how we are doing away with the environmental justice here in this country. So they'll be hearing cases about the environment. They'll be hearing cases most likely about our federal um, policing and
Mm,
how we, articulate the death penalty here and criminal justice here in this country. They'll be hearing cases about equal employment opportunities. I mean, that typically comes up every few years. Yes, healthcare is going to be part of that, and the overturning of Roe v. Wade is definitely a possibility if it's a
right.
sixth court. But LGBTQ community, LGBTQ Americans are going to have most likely some of their issues heard in court, especially when you have justices who are antithetical to believing that folks in that community should have equal rights, equal protections under the law. Folks with disabilities, they'll be hearing cases of with folks with disabilities. Immigration will be a big one as well. You know, what's going to happen with DACA? What's going to happen with the children that are being kept in cages in our quarters here in this country? Voting rights, the election itself, who knows what's going to happen? Are we going to have a president or a former president who walks away on January 20th peacefully with a peaceful transfer of
Mm,
power? Will the courts have to get involved in that? Education. I mean, we're going through it right now with students finding new ways to be educated here in this country. Who knows what kind of cases will be heard in the federal courts and state courts in Pennsylvania as well as it relates to that. So, I mean, the list could go on. Everything that people care about, the courts are going to hear about those cases in the next 2 years.
is there any particular issue that your organization is working on here in Pennsylvania?
So I've been talking a little bit about the federal courts, and I do want to mention and uplift one issue that's happening here in the state courts here in Pennsylvania, and that is this idea of judicial gerrymandering. I don't know if you've heard
Mm.
of that term, Rajette, judicial
Yes.
gerrymandering. Yes. So Representative Russ Diamond out of Lebanon County believes that we should start electing our appellate judges out of
Hmm.
districts that our legislators could actually gerrymander in their favor. And so that is something that we are fighting hard for here in the state of Pennsylvania with the We the People campaign and Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania and our partners in Common Cause and others trying to stop judicial gerrymandering in the state of Pennsylvania. It's another power grab by the GOP here in Pennsylvania to try to retain power. If you cannot control the executive branch, if you can't control the legislative branch, then you're going to try to get that power with the judicial branch. And so there is no reason that we should be breaking up the way that we vote here in the state as it relates to judges. We're going to have judicial elections next year for our state judges. There
Right.
are some open seats coming. And so we want to make sure that we continue to vote the way we've been voting for our judges, and that is statewide. There is no good reason for us to break up our appellate judges in districts. There's just no good reason to it, and so we'll definitely be fighting that in the next year, as that may come to the voters as early as May, as a referendum and changing our constitution the way we vote for state judges here.
Okay. Do you see widespread support for that bill among the legislature?
So it did pass out of the House and Senate in this last session. It passed the Senate very narrowly, a lot more narrowly than we thought it would. And so that tells us that depending upon what happens in this coming election, that bill would have to pass a second consecutive session. It would have to pass again, the House and the Senate, the same exact bill, for it to then go to the voters in a referendum. So elections have consequences. So at this point, whatever you're going to do on November 3rd or earlier, hopefully you are voting earlier, will have consequences as whether or not we could actually have some judicial gerrymandering in this state, because the Crajette and the fact that this judicial gerrymandering bill could pass in a second session if the legislature looks the way it looks currently.
Right.
And that would be very problematic for the state of Pennsylvania if we allow that to happen.
As you know, another term that's been pulling around for a while now, the merit selection of judges. Do
Mhm.
you have an opinion one way or the other whether or not they should be elected like we currently do, or they should all be selected by merit? And of course, we don't know what criteria would be used, but just the term.
Yeah, White Courts Matter Pennsylvania, we haven't really taken a position on that. We do have some of our organizational partners who have taken positions on that, such as Common Cause, League of Women Voters, and others. At this point, you know, if I'm speaking for myself, I would say that I kind of like being able to vote for our judges. We're one of like 6 states who still vote for our judges. But if I can vote for it, I want to be able to vote for it. That's just my personal opinion. I mean, I know that a lot of folks say that having a commission could help us bring diversity to the bench here in the state of Pennsylvania. Um, because we do have trouble selecting folks of color to
Right.
our state courts here in Pennsylvania. But I also know that deals can be made, backroom deals can be made to make judges here in the state of Pennsylvania. It's happened before. And I think that if there's something I'm allowed to vote for, I want to keep that right to vote for that thing at this time. But we haven't made, as an organization, White Courts of Pennsylvania, we haven't made a determination. We just want to make sure that the process is fair. And we want to make sure that we're getting more diversity on the bench here in Pennsylvania. What we do well is we do have a good amount of women sitting on our benches, our state court benches here in Pennsylvania, but we do not do a great job of putting people of color in position here in our state courts. And I don't know if that's going to be helped out by selecting judges through merit or commissions, or if that's through elections. But we definitely need to make sure that we find a way to make sure that the process is fair.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's the money needed to win elections? And obviously, judicial elections, it's harder to get a voter's attention because it's a nonpartisan position, even though technically you do run on a party label.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think over the last few years, it's been pretty expensive to win a
Yes.
state race, a statewide race here in the state of Pennsylvania, particularly for judges, Superior Court, Supreme Court. We just saw the Supreme Court race not too long ago, and how much money that took. So I think that, yeah, if we're trying to get money out of politics, it would be good. Maybe that's a good reason for merit selection, so we can stop having to raise all this money to make a judge a judge. But I think that these judicial races just aren't the sexy races, right? Even state reps and state senator races aren't as sexy to some folks. And I think that if more people understood the importance of the courts and what they are able to do to our individual liberties, then they would care more and be more investigative in making those decisions. I think that this is all done on purpose. I think that we don't provide the lessons that students need in school to learn more about civics. Maybe they stop at 101. Maybe we need to make sure that these students are getting above knowledge as it relates to the courts. They're just not getting the information that they need to make these decisions. And we can call these nonpartisan positions all we want. If they are that case, after being there on the bench for 10 years and we vote to retain them or not, we don't see the D or the R next to their name for retention votes. But when we're going there to poll the first time around, we see the D or the R next to it.
Yes.
And so there is supposedly no political reason, to have a judge have a D or R behind their name, because they're ruling it based upon our Constitution here in the state of Pennsylvania, or the federal Constitution if we're talking about federal judges. So I think that what you bring is that it takes a lot of money to win these races, and it's not easy to raise. I think you already know about that.
Yes. 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 And just for our watchers to know, next year is going to be a huge year in Pennsylvania for statewide courts. We're going to have 2 Commonwealth Court positions open, 2 Superior Court positions open, and 1 Supreme Court position open. So I'm sure we will be hearing from those candidates or potential candidates very, very, very soon. The thing about the courts is it's political, but then it's not. But then you can say the same thing about school boards, because technically that's a nonpartisan issue too, and we all know that's not the case.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in Pennsylvania and even on the federal level, there has been some scandals. You remember the Cash for Kids scandal here in Pennsylvania, and I'm sure you see similar things on the federal level because you need the money to run for these races, and sometimes people make bad choices, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. If you kind of go back to the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation, I mean, what we knew about him prior to being confirmed to be a Supreme Court justice is that he was heavily in debt. But yet, when somehow his debt has disappeared. So
I wish my student loan debt would disappear.
I wish my student loan debt would disappear too. Please take it, somebody.
Yes. Do you think the courts will be a motivator for voters this year, based on the individuals you come across during the work with your organization?
I think that the passing of RBG has kind of put the Supreme Court in the spotlight and has made it a voters' issue. We always hear that there's these one issue voters out there. Usually it's abortion rights or trying to take abortion rights away, I should say. So I think that there is going to be some sensitivity to the courts. There's going to be, this issue is going to be raised in the debates more than it probably would have if it weren't for the passing of
Right.
RBG. The fact that we got to hear where both candidates last night stand on the courts, and it got a good 10 minutes of the debate, which is it's exciting for me to hear, because as someone who works in trying to bring folks get their attention as it relates to the courts, I was happy to see 10 minutes of conversation about the courts. We usually don't get that. So yeah, I think this is going to be a voting issue. I think that some folks on the more conservative side, they put a lot of their money where their mouths are as it relates
Right.
to this. And like the groups I mentioned, Federal Society, Heritage Foundation, and they'll uplift whatever they need to do to make their cases heard. There's other organizations you'll hear from as well that are more on the progressive side, who are going to uplift these issues. Organizations like Demand Justice and others, who you'll probably see TV ads for here in Pennsylvania, because we're, obviously this election is running through Pennsylvania, it seems. Lots of mentions we got last night during the debate.
Yes.
So you're going to have this. This is going to be an issue. This is going to be an election issue, and I hope that everyone can uplift this and bring it to the attention of the voters, and they can understand that elections have consequences. And if they knew that their U.S. senators are the ones who are putting these judges on the bench, maybe they would keep going and voting down ballot as well.
If someone wants to learn more about Why Courts Matter PA, where could they go?
Yeah, so we're really active on Facebook. Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania is our Facebook page. We do have a website. I wish I could get to it more often to keep it updated, but we definitely keep the Facebook page updated. As I've been discussing, we're an organization who operates off of donations from our activists out there who are paying attention to the work we do. We don't have any national funders funding this work. This is all individual donors giving us $10 a month to keep this going and to educate folks. Prior to COVID, I was traveling the state. I think I've reached about 40 counties here in the state of Pennsylvania so far, and doing presentations and talking about the importance of the courts, and basically giving a civics 101 about how a judge becomes a judge, and trying to motivate folks to care about the federal courts. It looks a little different now in COVID times. Those kind of presentations
Right.
have moved to Zoom. I'm sure
Right.
you've had to change the way in which you also advocate and fundraising things here, Rajette. But yeah, I encourage anyone to go to Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania, our Facebook page, or our website, whycourtsmatterpa.org. And please give us a look if you have some money to donate to the organization, so that we can continue to do this work and uplift the issues of the federal courts and make people care.
We have a question from Stephanie here. She would like to know what your recommendation is for first-time voters looking for answers regarding how to best educate themselves on how judges are elected/nominated.
Yeah, so two different things. So how the judges are elected. So I'm newer to this work. I'm a journalist by trade. That's what I went to school for. I'm not a lawyer. So when I travel the state and I talk about the importance of the courts, hopefully I'm speaking to a level that folks understand or care to understand, because it is important for first-time voters to figure out who it is they want to vote for. I always give this example because I've been doing some of these presentations for college students at Bloomsburg, and I'll be doing one for Shippensburg soon, where we talk about what makes a judge a good judge, or why should I vote for this person. And we have so much information at our fingertips right now. We can Google these folks and find out what it is they're about. We can look at their Facebook pages and find out what they do on the weekends. Are they at the Boys and Girls Club, or are they at the golf course with Donald Trump? You can kind of make your determinations on what's going to make someone a good judge based upon these different issues, and how they've ruled on other cases. If they're coming from a lower court, how they've ruled on other cases. Particularly when I'm speaking to college students, I talk about Meek Mill, rapper Meek Mill, and the fact that he had a chance to actually vote for the judge that kind of made his life miserable as it relates to the parole that he's been under, and not being able to be able to carry out his job duties because of the parole sentencing. And he's able to vote for that judge or not, or retain that judge or not after 10 years. So my recommendation to first-time voters to get this information is, you've got so much information at your fingertips between Google and Facebook and social media, Ballotpedia, and in all other ways. Educate yourself that way. Besides that, the way in which the judges are nominated and confirmed, there are great websites and organizations that are doing this work and keeping this information updated, such as afj.org. That's the Alliance for Justice, afj.org, the American Constitution Society. and other organizations who are uplifting this work year round, not just during the election, but year round.
Well, great. Is there anything you would like to add before we ended tonight's broadcast?
I just want to thank you, Rajette, for giving me the opportunity to talk about the courts. It's not the sexiest subject, and it's hard to allow someone to give you 30 minutes to talk about them. So I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to talk about the federal courts and talk about our state courts as well, and why folks should really care about them. Also giving me the opportunity to talk about us needing to stop the judicial gerrymandering bill, House Bill 196, Russ Diamond's bill that has already passed out of the House and Senate. That needs to be stopped before it gets back to a second session. So I thank you, and I thank all the listeners out here who care about the federal courts and their independence. It's a co-equal branch of government that we must protect, and we must maintain its independence.
No, thank you for joining us and educating us on the different types of courts, the different levels, and sort of how an issue kind of goes through them. Unfortunately, sometimes we only care about the courts if someone's before them that we know, if we're before one, or if there's an issue we care about is before a court. But we do have a say in them. As you mentioned, we elect the people who nominate and appoint these judges. So we do have somewhat of a say on who gets on these benches. So thank you for reminding us of that. So again, thank you for joining us. I encourage everyone to go to the Facebook page of Why Courts Matter PA to learn more about the organization and see how you can get involved. Until next week, thank you very much.
Thank you.